Hi everyone, this video is for lesson 1.5. Our learning target today is I can recognize the subject in a sentence. So if you want to have out your Cornell notes, we're going to go ahead and get started. Our main questions over here in the left for today are what is a subject and how can I recognize it in a sentence? So we've been working a lot on finding verbs in the sentence first, and that is something we still want to try and do. And I'll kind of talk about why here in a minute, but just a quick note, you still always want to find the verb first because that's going to help you to find the subject. A lot of the reason for that is that sentences can often have more than one thing that looks like a subject, like there's often a lot of nouns going on. So by finding the verb, that's going to tell you what that main subject actually is. All right, so to answer those questions in the left, what is a subject? It is a person, place, thing, or idea being described. In other words, it's really just what the sentence is about. And to find the subject or to recognize it, what we're going to want to ask after finding the verb is who or what is doing the verb. And that's going to let you know what that subject is. So let's take a look at some examples. The first sentence says, after her morning jog, Kristen ate a donut. I think this is a great example of why you always want to find the verb first, because if I just tried to look for the subject initially, there's a lot of nouns going on here, right? I have jog, Kristen, donut. I don't necessarily know just by looking what that main subject really is. So instead, I'm going to find the verb first. The verb in this sentence is ate. So I'm going to ask myself, who ate a donut? To find the subject, the answer is Kristen, and you'll notice a lot of times we box verbs and we're going to highlight subjects, okay? So this sentence would be an example of a subject as just like a basic noun, right? You have Kristen. Kind of a different example would be something like this. He puts a lot of garlic on his food. So again, I'm going to find the verb first. The verb here is puts. I'm going to ask myself who or what puts a lot of garlic on his food. The answer is he, so I'll highlight that. And notice that's an example of our subject being a pronoun. So it may not always be a directly named proper noun. Sometimes it might be a pronoun or something like that. A few other examples of what subjects can look like. Pierre and Claudette walked down the street. Again, going to find my verb first, the word walked. Who walked down the street? Notice here, I have two subjects, right? Or what we call a compound subject. So both Pierre and Claudette are walking down the street. I'm going to highlight both of those. You also might see a sentence that looks something like this. Pierre walked down the street while Claudette shopped. So this is an example where we actually have two different verbs. So I see walked and I also see shopped. I'm going to treat those separately just in case to see if they have separate subjects or what's going on. So I'm going to start with the back and I'm first going to ask who or what shopped. The answer is Claudette, right? And then who walked down the street? It's Pierre. So I actually have two different subjects and two different verbs, and that can sometimes happen. So that's something that we would want to look for. And again, that's why we always want to ask who or what is doing each verb. The last thing in this lesson is something that can kind of trip us up sometimes. So a word of advice is that we want to ignore phrases that come between the subject and the verb. Those often can contain nouns or other distractors that are going to throw us off from what's really important in the sentence, which is the verb and then the subject. So to figure this out and to really ignore them, it's essential that you ask that question, who or what is doing the verb? So a couple examples here. We'll start with this first one. It says, the boy at the door is my brother. Okay, so I see that obviously my verb is, but I notice there's a lot of nouns here, right? I see boy, door, brother. That could be kind of confusing. So again, that's why I have to ask who or what is doing the verb. Who is my brother? And the answer is the boy. Notice I've crossed out that whole phrase between the boy and the verb, so the subject and the verb, because that's just a distractor, right? That at the door part is just some detail in the middle that's not really needed right now. Similar thing down here, the colors of the rainbow are beautiful. My verb is are, so I'm going to ask what are beautiful? It's not the rainbow, it's actually the colors, right? So notice a lot of the time what I'm crossing out are those things called prepositional phrases, or those things that start with like at, of, those kind of words. But you don't necessarily need to know those. As long as you're asking who or what is doing the verb, you should be able to ignore those. All right, so you should see some practice coming on your screen. And finally, make sure you add, oh, sorry, I skipped ahead. Add to your notes, especially any questions that you missed. Let your teacher know what questions you have. And finally, determine what kind of practice you're going to do.